So today we have two amazing guests. We have Richard Lawler, who's the senior news editor at The Verge, and we have Zohar Goshen, who's a professor of transactional law at Columbia Law School. Probably the perfect two people to have to discuss Twitter versus Elon Musk. So to kick it off, Richard, do you want to kind of set the stage with what happened?
I think everyone is still trying to figure that out. Thank you so much for having me. But I think the easiest way to go back is to this spring, where suddenly we had Elon Musk sent a letter revealing that he had become Twitter's largest individual shareholder, kind of setting the stage for the question of whether or not he would try to acquire the company. Then he said that he did want to acquire the company. They adopted a poison pill stance to kind of slow down his attempt to acquire the company. Then on April 25th, they announced a $44 billion merger agreement with his company. In between then and now, Elon is suddenly, despite being very vocal about the problem of bots on Twitter, has apparently learned that bots are a problem on Twitter and now believes that their statements about bot activity and daily active user count is invalid and makes the deal invalid. And on Friday, he filed to exit the deal. Twitter has sent back their response saying that he cannot get out of the deal the way that he's claiming, and that he is actually the one breaching the agreement. And it appears we're going to be headed to court. I think that's about where we are as of this minute.
That's a great recapping. And Zohar, from your perspective, how out of the ordinary is something like this? Are there any precedents that you kind of look to for guidance when it comes to making sense of all this?
So there are precedents, but it's important to understand what are the reasons that Elon Musk provided to justify that he would walk out of the deal. And he provided in the letter that he sent on Friday, he provided three reasons for that. One reason is that the information that was provided about the bots being 5% of the monetized users is inaccurate, and they didn't give anything in response, but they simply said, my client believed that the number is higher. My client believed, that's what they offered. The second claim that they made is that there is a covenant in the agreement in which Twitter committed to provide information, and they claimed that they didn't get the information. And the third one is a claim that Twitter committed to keep the company running in normal course of business, and they didn't do that because they fired two executives, third of the Department of Talent Acquisition, and they announced a complete freeze on hiring. And that's, from the perspective of Musk, it's a claim that they didn't honor that commitment. So these are the three claims. If you would wish, I can go into each one of them and explain whether they have merit or not and what's the precedence on that.
Just first, maybe before we get into the merits of, the back and forth here, just curious from both of your perspectives, what does it mean for this, as this lawsuit plays out, that Elon is still, on Twitter, poking fun at the company, keeping it somewhat transparent in a joking manner? Does that have any influence on, what's going to happen now in the courts? Or is this kind of just, Elon being Elon, it doesn't really have an impact? Or, are these tweets going to be pulled up in court and used as a way to kind of fight against Elon and what's going on? And how peculiar is this situation, given you have him, bad-mouthing the company in a way on the platform that the company runs?
Who do you direct this question to?
I'll open it up to both of you.
So I think this would have an effect, and it would have an effect especially on the claim that Twitter did not provide him with the information he requested, because the commitment to provide the information is qualified by the requirement that they would provide information which is reasonably required to close the deal. And from everything that he's doing, it is signaling, at least that they would what Twitter would claim, he's signaling that he's looking for the information in order to get out of the deal. So I think by this behavior, he would dramatically weaken the claim that they didn't provide him with information, especially when the other qualification that they don't need to provide information if it's going to harm the competitive position of Twitter. And with this behavior, he actually provide them with the evidence that they need to show that this is exactly what he's doing.
Got it. And Richard, any other thoughts here in terms of, how peculiar this is from, your reporting on this, and the Verge is in the mix in reporting on it. So just curious. I mean, it definitely keeps it entertaining, right?
Yes, Elon is a very one-of-one character and CEO, and a main character that I think all of the media and so many people around the world keep an eye on, because he does things very differently than almost any other exec. My colleague Elizabeth Lopato called him the first influencer CEO in a 2018 article that she wrote, and I think that's really never been more evident than in this situation, where almost any executive, and you can see Twitter on their side, they told employees not to tweet. On his side, Elon cannot stop tweeting, and we know that he cannot stop tweeting because he's suing the SEC so that he can tweet more. He cannot get enough of it, I guess, regardless of what is going on with the service. Exactly what all this means and what effect it has so far in many of the legal cases that he's been involved with, it hasn't seemed to burn him that badly. You've seen situations like the infamous pedo guy lawsuit, the defamation lawsuit, where he won that. And that has been kind of his experience. And I don't think that, based on what has happened previously, that he sees a reason to stop doing things the way that he does them. And there isn't really anyone necessarily who can tell him to do it. The SEC is trying, and you can see that one of the richest person there is spending a lot of resources to try and get out of that agreement, because he wants to do things this way.
So I want to open it up and then focus just Zohar on that first point around the bots, because what Elon is claiming, would go against what Twitter has put in their public filings, what they report on, all of the documentation they send to the SEC, what investors are looking at. What on both sides, if it were to be the case that bots account for more and there was, some type of misreporting there, versus, Elon is wrong and 5% is actually you. Like, how exactly do you go about determining that within the court system? And, what does that impact have, either versus, Elon having to purchase the deal or Elon being able to back out? And if so, what then happens to Twitter? Like, are they liable for, misrepresenting the number of bots they have? Just curious, how that all plays out.
So it's important to make. I'm sorry for doing that, but it's a technical distinction, but it's very important, because Twitter didn't say we have 5% bots or 5% fake accounts. That's not what they said. They say out of the monetized accounts, we estimate that we might have 5%, maybe more. And that's a huge difference. And what does it mean? Let's say they have 100 accounts and they found that 30 of them are bots. So they would exclude them from the list. When they go to their clients and sell advertisement, they would say, we only have 70. And out of the 70, we think that there might be 5%, which we didn't find, and maybe more. That's it. And Musk keeps saying 5% of the total users. But 5% of the total users, there was never, ever such a representation by Twitter. They never said that. So that's one thing. The second thing is that in the contract, this is known as a representation. It's not a covenant, it's a representation. And this representation is qualified by something that is called material adverse effect, meaning if I provided you with the wrong information, it has to be such information that if it's corrected, it will have a dramatic effect on the value of Twitter. And I don't think anyone really believes that this is true. That if you would correct the information, it will have such a dramatic effect on the corporation, because, as we all know, every company that is advertising has its own ways to measure the effect of the advertisement that are buying from Twitter, and they know whether it is 5% or less. Especially when you have someone who uh, waive his right for due diligence over these issues, and he knows about that for a very long time. So I don't think this could be used by Musk to get out of the deal. It's very unlikely that one would be the cause for the court to allow him to walk out of the deal.
And then as we're gearing up for this, if it does, it's going to go to court. Richard, what does it look like from the Verge's side? Are you actively gearing up a strategy on how to cover it, right? I guess, and even more broadly, what is the strategy for covering Elon Musk?
I was going to say, I think we're always gearing up a strategy to cover Elon Musk, and proving once again how he operates. I think it's happening right now, really, as we're speaking, that Twitter is suing Elon Musk, that the lawsuit has now been filed. So there's always breaking Elon Musk news, and at least from the Verge, the way that we approach it is we actually have a newsletter this week in Elon that we revived, that we had done a few years ago, and now it's back because there are so many things happening in the world of Elon, really even beyond Twitter, that involve Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and his personal life. There's always a story. So I feel like I personally am frequently on call for Elon doing things, because sometimes that includes Elon tweeting, sometimes it includes legal happenings, sometimes it includes businesses. And because he has so much money and he has this very strange, I don't know if it's a hobby or what he might call it, where he pretends to buy publicly traded companies and then doesn't do it. And kind of everyone recognized it because we saw what happened with the Twitter stock price, where it responded in a way that indicated that people didn't really believe that he would close the deal, at least at the price that was announced. And we all just kind of operated in this very strange world where Elon is both serious and also kidding all the time. And we never really know which is which. But because this is now a legal matter, this may be one time where we really have a serious outcome for Elon Musk and kind of the decisions and actions that he's taking.
And he's a pretty polarizing character, I'd say. Does that come into play in the covering of him or in the strategy of covering him? And then also just I'm interested is does he drive outsized traffic relative to other things the way he does on Twitter for you guys?
Elon, I think, kind of in news, the person or the story that is the main character always is a traffic driver, and Elon is always a main character. Stories about Elon that are interesting tend to drive traffic. So that is something, I think, why you see so much media coverage, because there is a lot of interest. People want to read about what he's doing and kind of try and figure out and get inside of his head and see what he will do next, perhaps. It's tricky covering him because on both sides, the people who love him for the reasons that they have and the people who hate him for the reasons that they have can be extremely, extremely, they have extremely strong feelings, and they will express that to you directly. If Elon Musk happens to tweet at you, I don't know if anyone has had that experience of being tweeted at by Elon Musk, but it's very interesting that one of the main claims of his is about the bot activity on Twitter, because his account is perhaps more than any other tied to bots, and that can be something that makes media coverage of Elon interesting, because of both the automated responses that follow him and can kind of swarm the account of someone who he tweets at, and the people the real human beings, and I think proving the difficulty that anyone would have in determining whether an account is automated and a bot or a real person. If you look at some of the very real people who follow him and the way that they respond, they seem like bots. They operate in a way that appears to be automated, because that is a style and kind of a personality that many people have taken on. So all of these things come into the coverage of Elon Musk, and it's the kind of thing that we think about, I think, every day, and every time we put up a story, we consider things about Elon Musk in a way that we wouldn't consider for, I think, any CEO of any other large company, because he acts so differently, and is in some ways very predictable, and it is in other ways very unpredictable.
Richard, I think you made a great point there in terms of, Elon has a huge following on Twitter, and he may be seeing, skewed bot activity because of how large his engagement is. But that doesn't necessarily, and this goes back to one of Zohar's points about, the distinction in what Twitter is saying, where, they're looking at 5% or, 5% or more of MDAUs. Not all of the accounts are being counted towards MDAUs. Twitter has, in previous years, I think it was in 2017, they reconfigured how they tracked user engagement and came up with MDAUs. So it's very possible that what Elon is seeing, those bots aren't being counted in what Twitter is actually reporting. That's a really interesting point. I hadn't thought about it in that manner, just given how large his following is.
Yeah, Elon experiences Twitter in a way that I don't think any other human being with a Twitter account ever could or would experience. Most people do not have people actively. There are sort of hacker sub businesses that actively try to go around and compromise verified accounts so that they can change them and make them appear to be Elon Musk's account, and then reply to everything that he tweets with perhaps an offer to click on a phishing link or to promote some crypto or something like that. And that's something that almost no other person would have. It's not that it doesn't happen to other high-profile accounts. It's just that it happens so much more for Elon. And everyone on Twitter and every subgroup on Twitter has its own rules and its own specific experiences. And his is so driven by very specific sort of toxic activity. So I'm sure that at least in some ways this does represent what he actually sees. It's just not the whole of Twitter,
Right.
really, as you said.
Right. Zohar, I want to bring it back to you and just talk about, what's next here. Obviously, we're going to have legal proceedings. What does, time like for these type of legal proceedings? Where do you think, in your opinion, who is standing on firmer ground in terms of this legal battle that's about to unfold? And there's also a $1 billion termination fee that's up for grabs. Or not, not up for, well, yeah, I guess up for grabs because Elon would, technically take that back. But just curious, what are your thoughts going forward now?
So this going to be litigated in Delaware. Delaware has the Chancery Court, where most of the publicly traded corporations are incorporated in Delaware. This is an expert court. They have handled almost every high-profile corporate litigation that you would know about was handled there. They practically, when you teach corporate law, you teach Delaware law. That's the place where it's going to be litigated. And in that litigation, my estimate is that out of the three arguments that Elon Musk provided, I already explained why I think two of them are not strong. He has the third one, which has some bite to it. I don't think it's a strong one, but it has some bite to it, that Twitter did not keep up with the covenant that the business will keep running normally because of the firing of the employees and the freeze on hiring. It's a judgment call. You might say this is an economy in downturn, so it's a normal business to cut on hiring and make those changes. And otherwise, you would say, oh, but I still need to know about that before you do any dramatic changes. So I would give it like slight value, but that's all I think that all they have in this bucket. Out of the three reasons that they provided. Normally, in this case, the agreement provides the right to choose between $1 billion termination fee and specific performance. The right is given to Twitter in the contract. More than that, if Twitter decides to go with specific performance, which I think this is what they're going to do, in the contract, there is an agreement by Elon Musk not to challenge their right to go with specific performance. So I think they would go with the specific performance, and the issue can be resolved within 2-3 months, even less. In Delaware, normally the proceedings are in writing and very few testimonies, and they can resolve it very fast.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Going to the one point you made around, normal business procedures or, continuing or business operations continuing, could Twitter point at Elon and say, these changes that you're talking about happened because you got in the mix? There were, I think, employees that were upset that Elon could be taking over Twitter. So how do you, as Twitter, defend that pillar in terms of, hey, you were in the mix, so this is normal because look at what happens when this wasn't happening before you got involved and you changed things, and this is normal, par for the course because you're now involved.
So I completely agree with what you just said, and clearly the employees that resigned due to the fact that they don't want to work for Elon Musk are not part of the breach of, or the claim of a breach of a normal course of business. However, the claim here is that they were actively firing the two executive, and half of the talent acquisition department, and instating the complete freeze on hiring. That's the claim, apart from the people who resigned on their own. Which I think it's many of them made it very clear that the reason that they are doing it is because they don't want to work for Elon Musk. I think from Twitter perspective, the most important thing is it's that this is not a major change. This is not something dramatic, and more importantly, that what you do see is that Elon Musk is actively trying to get out of the deal. It's a classic buyer's remorse after you offer $54 and then the Nasdaq dropped 25 or 30%, and now you feel that you are overpaying. So I think that at least in terms of precedents, when Delaware viewed the buyer as trying to find excuses to get out of the deal, they didn't buy it.
Got it.
And so then, Richard, back to you. How do you think Twitter's handled this whole situation since the offer was first made? Right? Twitter is kind of a media platform. I'd say you're a media expert. What do you think of the way they've gone about things?
To an extent, I've been generally impressed by how Twitter has kind of outwardly handled this. They have a basically brand new CEO who hasn't been CEO before, and his experience isn't in, I guess, being a media personality. And business-wise, I'm certain there are different arguments that you can make about what what options they have and what they can do. An issue that they've had is that they don't really have as many options as they otherwise could, because Elon Musk has so much money, quite frankly, and has access to so much funding. When he made his unsolicited offer to buy the company, it doesn't appear that there were really any other offers forthcoming that they could do. And for their shareholders, he offered the price that he offered. As Zara noted, represents quite a premium over the price then, and the market has dropped since, giving everyone even more of a reason to be interested in selling at the price that he proposed. And the unfortunate part is that because you are dealing with Elon Musk, where agreements are perhaps not as solid as they would be with other people, because it really depends on how Elon is feeling. He justified layoffs at Tesla recently, saying that he has a bad feeling about the economy, and he has kind of this personal control that you really wouldn't experience with if perhaps an investment firm or someone else was trying to buy the company. And dealing with someone who has so much, with just one person who has so much power, and you kind of see it in the lawsuit that they just filed. they said that he wants out of the deal because the deal he signed no longer serves his personal interests, and notes that he mounted a public spectacle to put Twitter in play. He's really the only person in the world who could or would do these things. So I don't know what else Twitter or its CEO Parag Agrawal could do, and that they've really kind of taken the only paths forward that they have so far.
Makes sense. Definitely a tough situation for Twitter. And we're running out of time here, so maybe just the last question here. Zohar, can Musk legally be forced to buy Twitter at this stage?
Yeah, so the court can issue a ruling which is specific performance. The fact that the bankers who provided the financing also provided the letter to Twitter, like when the deal was signed, and that letter, the way I read it, is not allowing them a lot of wiggle to get out of the deal. Even though they would like to get out of the deal because the credit conditions in the market have dramatically changed since they wrote that letter, and this might inflict a substantial loss on them. I don't know what's the exact amount. We need to know the difference in the spread. However, given that the financing is there, the court can do that. Enforcement might be challenging, and as normally you don't put people in jail if they don't comply with the injunction of the court. But most of his corporations are incorporated in Delaware, so Delaware will have jurisdictions over Tesla and over SpaceX and all the other corporations that he owns, and probably through that they will be able to enforce the agreement upon him. But it's something which is going to be new because this is unprecedented that you would force someone to pay $44 billion for a company that he doesn't want. But my estimate, it's not unreasonable for the court to make that decision.
So,
And just,
are you willing? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, just one last question. In terms of timeline, like what's the shortest amount of time this could be solved, and what's the longest amount of time that this could take?
I estimate a reasonable time for this to happen is about 2 to 3 months, but it can take. It depends on how heavy the factual background that needs to be prepared for the court to make the decision. It could take 6 months, but it's not. We're not talking here, in my view, about years. We're talking months, between 2 and 6 months, I would say.
Got it.
And are you willing to we like to ask people predictions here. What do you think is the most likely outcome?
Well, it's my
You don't need to be right. You don't need to be right.
No. I'm saying my guess is good as yours. At least technically, my reading of the evidence, my reading of the claims, and my reading of the precedents, I think the upper hand is with Twitter.
And Richard, any thoughts here? You've been following along.
The only predictions I'm willing to make are that definitely Elon Musk will continue to tweet. He always does. He will never stop. They cannot make him not be online.
Newton's
That's a
fourth
pretty
law.
safe.
And there are at least 3 or 4 other twists left of him doing something that no one else would do. It's the only thing that I know about Elon.
All right. Thank you. Thank you both so much for joining today. This has been extremely exciting. And I've learned a ton. Hopefully the listeners have as well. We'll have to have both of you back on as there are incremental updates here, given, how entertaining this is likely to be. But thank you both so much for joining.
Thank you for having me. Good night.
Thank you.
Okay, and as always, we will just wrap up with our disclosure, but please feel free to log off if you choose. The information provided in today's session is for informational purposes only and does not constitute an offer, solicitation, or recommendation regarding any investment product or service. Any reference is not an endorsement by ARC nor a recommendation by ARC to buy, sell, or hold. We cannot discuss any private or non-public material information of any kind. Participants should determine for themselves whether a particular service or product is suitable for their investment needs or should seek professional advice for their particular situation. Certain statements on today's call may be statements of future expectations or other forward-looking statements based on ARC's current views and assumptions and involve both known and unknown risks and uncertainties that could cause actual results, performance, or events to differ materially from those expressed or implied. ARC does not assume any obligation to update forward-looking information. All information discussed today is subject to change without notice. In addition, certain information was obtained from sources that ARC believes to be reliable. However, ARC does not guarantee the accuracy or completeness of information obtained from any third party. Thank you all so much for joining. We'll hopefully be back on similar time next week, either Tuesday or Wednesday, after market close. So thank you all so much.
If you would like to see more content like this, subscribe to our channel and download the public app where you can listen to these sessions in live time.